Welcome to Grant Rock Warehouse, and tonight I want to welcome Angie Moon back to the program. Tonight we are going to do a career retrospective of the band Small Faces. Steve Marriott and company, we want to hear from you in the chat. Let's do this.
Giving you what you paid for. Grant Rock Warehouse.
Welcome to Grant Rock Warehouse, and tonight Angie Moon is back. If you remember Angie, we had her on like a month ago talking about her book. Working on another book, but she recently just got back from Greece. We were chit-chatting about that before, but tonight she is back and we are going to talk about the band Small Faces. This is one of those bands, and like I was telling Angie before, that the Beatle was my gateway drug. The 60s stuff is my favorite. My channel doesn't really reflect that because the channel just kind of runs on its own, but we're going to start tackling a lot more of these 60s bands because there's so many bands out there that, well, as time goes on, we kind of forget about them. And I'm not saying that the Small Faces, Angie, were forgotten, but they were one of the great bands of the 60s. And, you know, during the era of the Beatles or Rolling Stones and etc., the Small Faces never really took off in the States like I think they should have. Because if you look at the album Ogdens, hold that up, Angie. You had the album.
Yep.
We're going to talk about this record, but this is one of those records you must have in your collection because it is a classic. For one. Amazing record. There was a box set that came out a couple years ago that I have. I had the original CD back in the 80s. I had all this stuff. I still have it, and I love the Small Faces. So anyway, we're going to talk a little bit about them. Angie, how did you get turned on to the Small Faces? Because you're quite a bit younger than I am, and, you know, I'm a relic.
Right.
But
here's the story.
Go ahead.
So obviously my gateway to classic rock were the Beatles. And from there I got into all the other 60s bands, all their contemporaries. I think that's just naturally where you're going to go next. You're not really going to go backwards in time because back then I saw the 50s as kind of boring, but really that is actually incorrect. But that's a whole nother topic for another day. Maybe another episode of Grant's Rock Warehouse. That would be fun.
We could tackle that.
The 50s would be a fun one to tackle. But anyway, I got into all the other British 60s groups, so those are all my favorites. So yeah, The Who, the Rolling Stones, the Kinks, Yardbirds. And then, of course, the Small Faces. I think they are just such a great band, and I got into them because of my love of the mod subculture. So when I was a teenager, I was really into The Who, loved the movie Quadrophenia, and I was like, wait, so there's more than just hippies in the 60s. All I ever knew of the 60s was, oh, it's just hippies. Wait, you mean there was a subculture before that called the mods?
Yeah.
And the Small Faces were the mod band? Sign me up. And that's how I got sold on the Small Faces. That's how I got into them. And I was just amazed at just Steve Marriott's voice. I just love his voice so much. Like, if you like Steve Winwood's voice, I'm sure you've all heard Give Me Some Lovin' and Higher Love and songs by Traffic. I think you'll love Steve Marriott. He's amazing.
Yeah, this is when Steve's voice, I mean, when he did end up going into Humble Pie, he kind of blew his voice out because he was screaming all the time. Here, though, he's pure. This is like peak Steve Marriott for me as far as vocals. But you know, Small Faces and Humble Pie are two different animals. You know, Small Faces more like a psychedelic pop band to some degree, and Humble Pie was just like a boogie band. So it's like a different animal. So I really can't compare it. But Steve did kind of blow his voice out later.
Yeah, I mean, that hard rock
great,
and that blues rock, it really can ruin your voice. I mean, look at what happened with Robert Plant, Roger Daltrey, too.
Yeah.
Like, his vocal cords, too.
Yeah. So, you know, it is what it is. But the Small Faces, they formed in 1965. The initial members were Steve Marriott, lead vocals, guitar, harmonica, keyboards, Ronnie Lane on bass. He also did vocals, Kenny Jones on drums, and Jimmy Winston on organ and keyboards. Now, he was replaced by Ian McLaughlin in 1966. So Jimmy had musical differences between the bands, so they replaced him. So the classic lineup is with Ian McLaughlin, obviously. And his keyboard work on a lot of this stuff, Angie, you have to admit, absolutely.
It's great.
It's absolutely brilliant.
It's the underappreciated role in rock and roll, the organ player, the keyboard player. It's the underappreciated person in a rock band, and he's the underappreciated one in an underappreciated band.
100%.
Like, underappreciationception right there.
But the thing is with the Small Faces, you know, they were all in that mod thing, like with the Who, and they kind of evolved into psychedelic rock. Now it's not like real psychedelic, like you think, like, I don't know, if you want to like strawberry alarm clock or chocolate watch band or something like that. It's more like the British psychedelia, and it's just like on a different level. The Who kind of dabbled in that, the Who sellout, but it's kind of like on par with that. Both 1967, ladies and gentlemen, was the peak for all this stuff. It's like you've got Ogdens coming out, you've got
That was actually
that's
1968.
68, but you had,
Yeah,
okay,
that
there are
Village
born,
Green, you had SF
right,
Sorrow, you had the White Album, Astral Weeks,
right. But 67, 68, 66, where things
good
started to
stuff.
happen, with Revolver and all that.
I mean,
Um,
it was the dandy years, is what I would say, because it was like right after, like, because mod went out of style in like '66 when it became commercialized. Ray City Go was out, so that kind of marked the end of the mod era. So then there was this kind of transition between the mods and the hippies, which is the Peacock Revolution or dandies.
yeah, there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
Their first
Oh, it's great.
record, well, they were signed. I do want to mention this, that their management was Don Arden. So if anybody
Ooh,
knows Don Arden,
very timely considering Ozzy
oh,
just passed.
100%. But Sharon is Don's daughter. So, but Don Arden managed a lot of different bands, but he also managed the Small Faces. They put out a record in 1966. Now, the UK albums were never released in the States. It wasn't until There Are But Four Small Faces in 68 before they had an album in the States. So we're going to talk about those records.
That
But
was the one with Ichiku Park. That's probably, if an American knows the Small Faces, that's the song that they know is Ichiku Park.
100%. So, but their first album in 66 was just the Small Faces. And that came out on Decca. And that was basically an album of R&B covers and originals. But, Marriott's soulful vocals are there. The band is energetic, very tight. This is also was the album that was recorded during that lineup change from Winston to Ian McLaughlin. But in the UK, it peaked at number 3. It was a successful record. Here in the States, we had no idea about it. So that Small Faces Decca album from 1966. Angie, what's your thoughts on that record?
I think it was a really strong start for the Small Faces. You could really see that, they were great musicians. Steve Marriott's voice is fantastic, and their covers are just really good. So, like, there's a couple songs on there that I want to highlight that were excellent covers. So, being from Chicago, I really appreciated that the first track on the album was a cover of Sam Cooke's Shake, and that is one that it's a song that makes me really sad, even though it's a very up-tempo song, is because it was one of the last things that Sam Cooke ever recorded, and that was right before he died at the end of '64. And like that was the direction that R&B was going in. So who knows how many more songs that Sam Cooke had in that brilliant mind of his.
Yeah, true.
Like that was the future of R&B. And I think Steve Marriott did a wonderful tribute to that. The other one that I think that was an excellent cover was You Need Loving. And this was way before, like this was years before Led Zeppelin did Whole Lotta Love. And Steve Marriott did it fantastically. Like I love Robert Plant. I think both versions are great. I think Steve Marriott definitely must have had an influence on Robert Plant with that one.
I mean, they were only on Decca for like one record. And I don't know what happened there. They were signed immediate after that. I mean, I don't think this is a fine record. But when I listen to it, it's not like the Small Faces have arrived. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's
I
kind of
think
like
it's a
the
good
Kinks,
opener.
similar trajectory there, where they started off just doing some covers and very R&B sound, which I love R&B. I love the British rock and roll take on it. But I think it is so important for a band to find themselves, and they always got to try something new. I think that is just something very important. That's how you do it as an artist. You can't stand still. You have to keep going.
Right.
And the following album had a lot of covers, quite a few Motown and Stax covers.
Yeah, it just was like everybody else. Stones were doing it, Beatles were doing it. But the Beatles, we could always talk about the Beatles, but the Beatles were the trendsetters, even though they would probably disagree. I think Paul McCartney might have said, well, people always said that, but I think they just shrugged that off. But it's
He's being very
true.
humble there. Like the Beatles were absolutely just, the blueprint there for all the
100%.
'60s bands.
Mhm.
Everybody was doing what they were doing. Like
Yeah, they
anybody who
followed.
was, yep. Any teenager back then, when they were making music, they were just copying the Beatles.
So if you think about it, 1966, okay, I get it. Everybody's a little bit late to the party. They're still doing covers by 66. And of course, the Beatles have moved on by that. So, but that's fine. It's okay.
They were younger, like by a few years. Like Steve Marriott was born in 47. Yeah, Ronnie Lane, I think, was born 46. Kenny Jones, I think, was even younger, born 48, I believe. Yeah, they were all quite young. Like, they were a few years younger than the Beatles. So naturally, they weren't going to be like, they would be, like, they were already talented.
Yeah.
And Steve Marriott already had a history of being a prodigy as far as like music because he was in Oliver playing the Artful Dodger. Same role as Davy Jones played.
Yeah. Well, I've read some things in the past and people have commented on, I can't think of who somewhere in my travels, Angie, but they've commented on how blown away they were by Steve Marriott. And he had so much talent that people were just like in awe, you know?
He was an actor before he was a rock star. Like that's like something that I sometimes forget about. That's probably why he had just such a good stage presence is he had it in him all along from his acting background.
Way things work out, they only put out the one record on Decca, but they got signed to Andrew Loog Oldham's label Immediate.
Yeah, they left Decca and signed Immediate. So 66, 67, they were making that transition to a new label. And then Ian McLagan, he wrote his first solo song for the band. That was Up the Wooden Hills to Bedfordshire. And
Classic.
Really good song. And this was a sole composition on the album that was not written or co-written by Marriott Lane. So everything, like Marriott Lane were very much a powerhouse, like your Jagger Richards and Lennon McCartney. I think that's what made them so powerful.
This is where I
Oldham was
think that
done
Small
with the
Faces
Stones.
arrived, you know? And it might be because Ian McLaughlin was added to the band. Maybe that was what they needed. The chemistry between them. Because obviously you listen to these records, Angie, and you can just hear it. There's just magic on these albums. But this album, there are no covers. They're writing everything on the first Immediate album. Now, I wanted to mention the first Immediate album came out in 67. In the US, we had There Are But Four Small Faces, which is this album, but they basically added the UK singles and adjusted the lineup. So it's kind of the same record. But I wanted to mention that because, well, that's what we got here in the States. So,
and it's, I think, a very well put together album because it has all the good stuff, like mixed with some of the stuff from the latest album. I think that's a smart way of doing it to introduce people to the band.
Itchy-Coo Park leads off. There Are But Four Small Faces. And of course, that came out in early 68, which Itchy-Coo Park is not on the other record. Talk to You is the next track, Up to the Wooden Hills to Bedfordshire, which I love. My Way of Giving. It's like they were on fire at this point. This is where everything gelled. I do know that there was, I don't remember, there's been multiple CD releases and LP releases of this stuff, and I couldn't even tell you which one to start out with. What I've got on this, I've got the old Sony reissue of this, because Sony back in was it the late 80s, early 90s, they did a whole Immediate catalog reissue campaign. So they put out a lot of stuff on Immediate. And that's the version I've got of it. And it sounds great to me. But
yeah, I mean, There Are Before Small Faces is kind of like a best of album.
yeah,
Like,
it's a comp.
Itchy-Coo Park's great. Yeah, I'm Only Dreaming. I think that one's underrated. Like that one a lot. Tin Soldier's great. Get Yourself Together is a mod classic. Here Come the Nice is really good. Green Circles is great. Yeah, no, it's just a solid album overall. Very short but sweet.
Short, but it's a sequencing good. The track lineup's great. And it's funny, this only peaked at 178 here in the States. No one
Way too low.
Way too low.
It's
It
poor
peaked up at,
marketing.
well,
I mean, the mod subculture just wasn't big in the US because there were only small pockets of it. I know someone whose father was a mod back in the 60s, but that was just really rare. Like, you hardly saw anybody like that. Like, sure, there were plenty of people like Motown and stuff, but there wasn't really a mod subculture, so to speak. Like, Vespas were not popular in America. No one was driving that. They were too busy with their Cadillacs.
Exactly. But you have to admit, this record was way more popular in the UK. It at least peaked at number 12. Here in the States, just a blip on the screen. Even though I think, chart-wise, I think Itchy-Coo Park got quite a bit of airplay, but I don't know why things work the way they do. This should have been a way bigger record here. Way bigger. By 68, you've had Pepper, you've had Pet Sounds, you've had all these records. It should have been way bigger. I just don't get it. None of
I
it
think the
makes
real
sense.
masterpiece, though, is Ogdens. Like, that was the real masterpiece, and I think that is like a great way to just end the Small Faces, basically. That's just such a
Hmm.
great way to end the band. And from there, Steve Marriott joined forces with Peter Frampton from The Herd and started Humble Pie.
Yeah, I've read something where Steve said, or maybe Frampton, not Frampton, but Marriott had said that they took it as far as they could go. That where could you go after Ogden's? Isn't that something that in that short career, they felt like they couldn't go any further and he had to do something else. But we know the Small Faces kept going. They became the Faces, but yeah, it's kind of a different animal, even though it's
Yeah, it's
basically.
not. I'm not a Rod Stewart fan, so yeah, not really a fan of the Faces.
Anyway, Ogden's Nut Gone, 1968, also came out
Oh,
on
love this
immediate.
one.
One of the 1960s 100. It's a masterpiece. It's a
It's
masterpiece.
great because I love like the narration between the tracks. I think that's what makes it cohesive and like a great album. That's the era of the concept album oriented rock, all of that. Like you got to have like something linking the songs together. And I kind of find just so much charm in that narrator just telling a story. I didn't even understand what he was saying because he was some old British guy, but still,
Right.
I just find it adorable. I love it.
And the
I
other,
think that's why it didn't make it in America, is it's just too British for Americans to understand, I
and
think.
I just don't know how much they pushed it either. But the packaging, we have to mention the packaging. A buddy of mine had the original. Okay, I have a story. He went to high school like in the early 70s, and of course, there's a lot of cutouts. He bought Ogden's as a cutout, like at a, I don't know, somewhere. Because even in the early 70s, you evidently could get it as a cutout. Now, the original packaging for it would fold out, because we know it's a parody of a tobacco brand, and it was like a round album cover. So he bought it like that. No one even really cared. It was still in the cutout bins. And he picked that up then and was totally turned on by it, but it would fold out. So the packaging was very creative. The whole concept of the concept album is very creative. But this record has rock, it's got soul, it's got psychedelia, and of course you got happiness
They were
stand
just
on it.
so broad, like in their music, like, music hall, psychedelia, soul, a bit of jazz sometimes. Like they sometimes get jazzy there. Like it's great. Like they
100%.
really were just so versatile. I mean, like the Beatles are versatile, but so are a lot of other bands. They were much more versatile than than people give them credit for.
Yeah. A lot of people consider this the peak. What do you think? Peak?
I think that's it. That's the best album you could retire on. Like it's kind of
Mhm.
like why like, you retire after winning the championship or whatever. You're just like, that's it. I can't top that.
Yeah, if you ever heard of that book 1001 albums you must hear before you die, this is
Hmm.
one of those. I would 100%. This, if you could start out here, I would say this would be a great. I mean, this album's very rewarding. It's a
Just
wonderful record.
like the intro, like that instrumental track at the beginning. I'm a sucker for
Hmm.
instrumental rock, and like by that point it had died. But I think this kind of just nearly resurrected that kind of instrumental because it was psychedelic and instrumental, and it just took you just to this other world.
And it's
Feels like
kind of
just bursts of
odd
color. It's amazing.
if you think about it, though. Pet Sounds had instrumentals on it, but they open with an instrumental, which I think is kind of a bold move. But hey,
It's a good one.
it's a good move. Of course, it's a concept album. Afterglow, my God.
Oh, I love
The,
that one.
I love the whole thing. But Song of a Baker, Lazy Sundays on here. Absolutely.
Rolling Over just reminds me of Jimi Hendrix with that guitar riff. It's great.
Mad John. It's a lot of these tracks you kind of have to chuckle, but there's the melodies, the production's great. It's got very broad, the stereo mix at least is very broad, is very
Hmm.
spacious. I don't know. I wish it just flows perfectly. It's one of my all-time favorite records. So what can I say? I don't find any, there's no filler on it. It's just a perfect record. I what more can I say?
I think that just is a great way to end like kind of that the Small Faces as a, an era, and that just gives them a legacy. Like, what more could they have done? And I think that mystery is there, and I think sometimes it's good to have that mystery.
I do too.
Kind of like with the Zombies and Odyssey and Oracle. That was another great 68 album. That's another great one.
Yeah, that was recorded during Pepper, I think, and like Piper at the Gates of Dawn. All those were like recorded right at the same time they were all at Abbey Road. Fabulous. Well, a classic. And again, another record that didn't sell a whole lot in the States. None of this makes sense to me. So after that, they put out Autumn Stone, which is another compilation. What's your thoughts on Autumn Stone?
So yeah, Lazy Sunday is on there. I mean, that's a great one to include. Afterglow of Your Love is great. I love Flo and Eddie's version. I think that's just so cool that the Turtles knew about them, and they were also that band that helped the Kinks get their touring ban ended because they had Ray Davis produce one of their albums. Gotta remember them for that. Let's see, Collie Balsher, great instrumental there. Like that one. All or Nothing is great. Just love that one. This is another one, just a great intro to the band, for sure. And it's all just their originals. Except for Shalali, which was Kenny Lynch, who was, I believe, one of the first to record a Beatles cover, if I remember right. That's it. He was, yeah, Kenny Lynch was the first to release a Beatles cover. And he wrote a song for the Small Faces. That's really cool.
So Autumn Stone came out in 69. It's a double comp. It was released in November 69, several months after the official breakup. So this was compiled by Andrew Loog Oldham. It's just basically, it kind of serves as a retrospective of the band's career and what it is previously unreleased tracks and tracks that were never completed for the fourth studio album. Why did they abandon that fourth album? I mean, I wonder if, they were recording it and Steve Marriott just went, well, what more can we do?
He just abruptly quit the band is what the story was, is he just quit, like walked off a stage after a live gig on New Year's Eve 69, like 1969 beginning. He was like, that's it, no more. He didn't want to be poppy anymore. He wanted to do something different. And I think that's the thing, like if you stay in that poppy sort of sound, you'll always just be written off as just, some teeny bopper and you're never going to be taken seriously. I mean, Peter Frampton kind of had a bit of that struggle there with like becoming kind of a pin-up sort of.
But is it the thing? It wasn't the thing that people didn't take them seriously? Is it because of Marriott's career as an actor or whatever? Did that have something to do with it? Do you think?
I don't think so. Because I think they were young, and I think also their size. I mean, that was also something that, that's how they got their name. Everybody was around like 5'4". They were all tiny.
True.
Like, smaller than me.
But I don't know. There's a lot to it. I'm sure someone in the comments can fill that in. But Autumn Stone, I think, is just as great. I know it's a comp, but it's got the Universal on it, which is fabulous. It does have Itchy Coo Park on it. But don't forget that this was released in the UK. I don't think there was ever a release here in the States, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, like something I just think about with their legacy is just, it's so sad that it took forever for them to get inducted into the Rock Hall. And like the saddest thing is like Steve and Ronnie never got to see that happen. Like I know the Rock Hall is kind of, it's kind of bull, if you're a real rock fan, but I think it's just getting that honor and being kind of taken seriously as a rock band. It's kind of like still kind of that rite of passage for a classic rock band.
Yeah, and with all these different comps and the way their catalog was handled in the UK and the US, it's kind of it's kind of messy.
It's like you're almost setting them up to fail in a way. It reminds me of like what happened with Freaks and Geeks, that TV show. Like it was so good, but ABC was just going around sabotaging them.
After that, though, well, that was
high.
it. They were at 69. That was it, and they didn't have anything out until they regrouped in 77 with Playmates, which was the first reunion album.
I didn't really think much of that one.
I didn't think much about it either. Yeah.
Like I know that Jimmy McCulloch, I think, worked with them for that one or something like that. Or 78 in the Shade, I think is what they did.
Yeah. I'm not sure exactly what the motivation was for them to get back together.
Money.
But I think, well, money, 100%. But I don't think, I'm not going to spend much time on it, but it's kind of faceless. It's not anywhere near the magic that they had back in the day. You can't capture it twice. and it was too long. You know, the 70s, the late 70s, a different era. And
Yeah, it was new wave and punk and disco, and what they were doing was just so different from that. It's just
mhm.
hard to compete with all that because you're kind of just old news, you know, you're kind of a dinosaur by that point, even though, you know, you're not old, but in the music industry, old is just way younger than like what ordinary people think of as old.
Yeah, and this record, Angie, kind of leaned into that American soul rock. And this is when punk was out. So,
I don't know if I'd want to see them try punk or new wave. I'm not sure if I'd like to see that.
mhm. But I don't know. It was a commercial flop. And me personally, I don't think there's really anything there. Unless you're a completist, you want to try Playmates in 77. And the same thing with 78 album, 78 in the Shade. It's American soul, but there's no spark. And it didn't do anything commercially either. So
Yeah, it's just like Steve Marriott was just somebody who just couldn't catch a break, you know, getting screwed over by Don Arden in the 60s and then
mhm.
Dee Anthony in the 70s. And then just basically his management with Humble Pie when Peter Frampton left, they were just like, yeah, let's go put all our money on Frampton. And, you know, he had his success with Frampton Comes Alive, but then Steve Marriott was just like completely robbed. It was kind of like a Badfinger story. And it's just so sad. Like his demise in like 1991, where he
Mhm.
just died in a house fire. All because he just argued with his wife, went home, smoked a cigarette, didn't put it out. There it was.
And that's the end of the story.
And like the sad
Yeah.
thing is, he just become so distrustful of record labels that he just couldn't trust anyone. I think
hmm
maybe the failures of those Small Faces reunion albums were probably contributing to that.
Yeah, I think as far as their legacy goes, they should have just stopped. 69, let's to put out those other records. I mean, they're just not, they pale in imitation. It's like when the Hollies regrouped. Remember the original Hollies reunion
Mhm.
album in the 80s, and it's very commercial, very 80s sounding. It's just,
Yeah, like
mm,
the 80s had a lot of good stuff, but just don't judge it by like what the 60s musicians were doing then. Just don't judge it by that. Like the new
yeah.
stuff of the 80s, good stuff. It's just like what the classic rockers from the 60s and 70s were doing then, hit and miss.
It's like
Let's
they couldn't make the transition, you know? And I think it takes away from their legacy too. I don't know. But the Stones, I mean, they put out some commercial stuff in the 80s and they never stopped. So to their, you have to hand it to them. They kept going. But whether you like that stuff like Dirty Work, whether you like that or not. But Some Girls is a great record. Emotional Rescue's all right. Tattoo You, great
start
record.
me up.
But it's not that, when I mean 80s, Angie, I'm talking like gated drums, the whole real, very echo laden music,
Since
very commercial. Like by 86, things just got out of hand, I think. Unless you were a band that came out during that era, legacy bands. Like, look at, okay, Heart. They made that transition into the 80s. Whether you like that stuff or not, I'm not a fan. Same with Cheap Trick,
yep.
The
Like that's the
Doctor,
sad thing is like with Heart, like their best stuff was in the 70s. Like that was their best
100%.
stuff. And Ann and Nancy hate performing the 80s stuff, but that's what the fans expect. So it's kind of like I guess I'm gonna have to perform this. And it's just so sad that musicians can't really perform music on their own terms always.
Yeah, the secret sauce for Heart was Roger Fisher. When he got ejected, everything changed, even though I think Baby Lestrange is a fine record.
Hmm.
But the Roger Fisher years of Heart, that was.
Oh yeah, Little Queen and The
Mhm.
Dreamboat Annie are just such great albums. I'm so glad I have them on vinyl.
hmm And I think it has to do with, I know we're on a tangent, but ladies and gentlemen, we always go on tangents here in the warehouse. I think it was that combination, that original lineup had that chemistry, and chemistry has a lot to do with it. And you can't, once it changes, so the Small Faces putting an album out in 77, 78, it just doesn't work. Didn't work. The chemistry was gone. But
It's just so important to have it. I mean, like, in a way, I mean, a rock band is like a workplace. It's such a nerdy way to put it, but it is.
Hmm.
Like when you work really well together, the result is so much better. But when you're like kind of dreading the people you work with, it isn't going to come out
It's
good.
not going to work very well.
Or like it
Um,
has to be very passionate, even if like there's arguments like within like say the Kinks or
uh-huh.
Oasis with those sibling rivalries. But at least there was like passion behind that.
You know, you think back on it, it's kind of good that the Beatles never reunited
I agree, big time, big agree.
because it
Like
could have been the same kind of thing and that could have tarnished their, well,
it just cheapens their
legacy to
image.
some
It
degree.
just yeah, like
But free as a
sometimes it's
bird,
just
I will give Paul and Ringo and Jeff Lynne, George a nod because what they did with Free as a Bird, I think was fine. I don't think it tarnishes anything because I think it was good. I think Jeff Lynne was probably the guy to work those singles or work those John Lennon demos. That I don't think takes away from anything, like almost like a tribute. But if they really had gotten back together and started producing things, I don't think it would be the same.
yeah. Like Real Love was another great like one from the anthology. Like I
Mhm.
like that one the
It
best.
works well too. I don't have any problem with that stuff.
Now and Then I even think was good. Like that latest release. I think that was pretty good.
Yeah, that one, that didn't do anything for me. I think, it was okay, but I think they probably needed Jeff Lynne for that.
But I think that's just what makes the Beatles so magical is just the consistency of their discography is unmatched. Like no band comes close to that. I think the only one that comes closest to that is Led Zeppelin. But even then they kind of fell off at the end in my opinion, but that's just my hot take.
But Paul was, if Paul McCartney wasn't, the Beatles would not be what they were because he was the guy that would ring everybody up. All right, boys, time to go back into the studio. John and Ringo would be sitting by the pool. You know, Paul was he was the, I don't want to say it's a combination, but Paul's work ethic is what kept them together and had them produce such great works, you know?
That's what gave him the best solo career of all four of them, like Wings,
Yeah,
just
because he was a
incredible solo
workaholic.
career.
Paul's a workaholic. He couldn't stop, but they wouldn't have been the same because they would just kind of done their thing. But I don't know where I'm going with that. Just on a tangent. Andy, sometime I get on these tangents, I don't even know where I'm going. It is what it is. But either way, we are here talking the small faces, or we were, and it's all about turning you on to stuff. So that whole Small Faces 60s catalog, not a dud. All the records are good. I would start out with Small Faces 67, which is the UK album, or the American album. Or
Mhm.
four Small Faces. You could start there. Or Ogdens, I think. You could get Autumn Stone if you want, because it would be a good entryway as well.
Like you can't go wrong with the Small Faces. Like any album you get, it's like I gave my husband one. I think it was one of the early ones, but even then, he still loved it. He was like, "This is still great."
Yeah. See, when I first heard it when I was a kid, I got it 100% because my buddy, like I said, he was the guy that found the cutout in the cutout bin and was totally taken by it. And he's the one that turned me on to it. And and I think my gateway was Ogden's. That was my gateway drug. And ever since I heard it, I have been hooked. So if you haven't heard that record, ladies and gentlemen, do yourself a favor, go out and check it out. Report back
That's
down below.
that's the real flex. Is like if you were able to get that cutout from the cutout bin back in the
Mhm.
day. I mean, that is the real flex. Like you're just like it's like how people on TikTok will say, "I'm gatekeeping this." It's like you are kind of gatekeeping it. Like, oh my god, I got this thing in my
Well, back
collection.
then, you'd see well, for me, the store that I have with cutouts, and I can't remember if I told you this or not. When I was about 5, there was a store in Ohio called Bargain City. And the only reason I remembered it because I was kind of captivated by the album cover. That's the only thing that I remembered from it. And it wasn't until later that I realized what it was. So when I was there, I would go through the records because when I was a kid, I was just record crazy. Crazy. But I was listening to a lot of Disneyland records or whatever, but still record crazy as a kid. I went through the bins. So wait a minute. So it wasn't it was early 70s. So I'm just a kid. I'm just looking through the bins, and they had for 50 cents a piece, they probably had this many the second Big Star album as a cutout. Now,
Oh, wow.
they were 50 cents a piece. They had this many. And I didn't know what it was. No one bought that record then, 73, 74, or whatever. It was just a cutout bin. No one cared at that point. But if I had known, I would have bought them all. I said, Dad, give me some money. They would have been, and keep them sealed all these years and then sell them.
Be
But
worth
yeah,
something. Yeah.
but a lot of people I've talked to said, yeah, we used to see a lot of Zappa in the cutout bins. There was a lot of stuff that would appear. One of the things that I remember when I was a kid is Queen Jazz. Tons of them in the cutout bins. You go out and look for them now. There's a lot of them with cutouts. Now, you think Queen Jazz would be a cutout album? It was a cutout album. Hot Space ended up in the cutout bins.
SF Sorrow's another one from '68 that it was a cutout because it had like that tombstone.
Yeah. But it's just funny. You think some of these great albums that we look at now, at the time, no one cared about Ogdens, but it's a classic.
Every Nick Drake album is basically that. Every single one.
100%. No one paid attention to him while he was alive. I think that wasn't it everything that he kind of became something after he passed away.
Yeah, he never lived to see his popularity, which just makes me so sad for him because it's like, if only you could just wake him up for a couple minutes and go, hey, Nick, Pink Moon, people love it.
It's great. Of course, what was it, the VW ad or was it an Apple ad?
Yeah,
I think it was a VW ad which is a phenomenal record. If anybody hasn't heard it. But
Brighter Later is my favorite of the three. Like, that might be, I don't know if it's controversial or not, but I just love how well produced it was. I think Hazy Jane, just great song. I love that one.
So there you go. Well, Angie, I guess we can wrap this up. We've went on tangents. We've talked Small Faces. We've talked the Beatles. We've talked all kinds of things. But the whole thing is, go out and check out some Small Faces album. If you have not done it, do yourself a favor.
This one.
Yeah, go get that one.
I'm going to tell you guys to check out because Ogdens is just so great. I love it.
100%. All right, Angie, anything coming up? You're still working on your book? What's going on?
So with that book, I'm on the second chapter. I'm at the end of the Chicago Black Sox chapter. So that one is all about the whole scandal, and it's one of baseball's biggest scandals. And that's the one that led to 8 men from the White Sox being banned from baseball. And they were banned from eligibility from the Baseball Hall of Fame. Until recently, they've just lifted the ban. So who knows? Maybe in the future we might see Shoeless Joe Jackson in the Baseball Hall of Fame. Oh my gosh,
put him in the Rock Hall too while you're at it.
Yeah, why not? Say it ain't so, Joe.
They let everybody else in that's not rock, so you might as well let Shoeless Joe in too. That's a whole other tangent.
Oh my god. And yeah, kind of related to this. So kind of related to our first chapter. So the first chapter, Celebrity Trials, was about Oscar Wilde. And here's a little weird connection that I found between him and Steve Marriott. So this is actually one of my first exposures to his work, sort of, but it wasn't him. It was the artist who did the cover of his book. So the artist's name was Aubrey Beardsley. He was like a really kind of controversial artist for his time. I mean, they were kind of like the punk rockers of their day, really. And the Humble Pie self-titled album from 1970 is also called the Beardsley album because it features a drawing from Salome, and there it is. Right there.
There it is, right
so
there.
That looks familiar. So there you go. Mm-hmm. A little literary kind of reference in Humble Pie, and I got a kick out of that. Like, I had to end this episode with that reference because kind of about what I'm writing, but also just it's about the music we're talking about, sort of.
Yeah, 100% fits right in, Angie. 100%. All right, cool. Well, Angie will be back. We'll be talking more 60s, ladies and gentlemen. Because
can't wait.
We'll decide what we're going to do. But there you go, Small Faces. Angie, it's always a pleasure talking music with you. And
likewise.
All right, we will do it again.
Be on the show.
Oh, it's always fun. All right, we'll see everybody. Have a good, I'm not sure when this is going up, but it shouldn't be very long because the balloons went off. All right, everybody, we'll see you. Keep it clean, keep it real, and Angie will be back. We'll see everybody.